Greetings! Unfortunately, we have seen an increasing amount of high-profile players getting banned for cheating, especially in the tournament scene. Well, fortunately, if you consider that at least they have been caught. This raises the question whether we are dealing with cheating and restrictions optimally, or if we could use some change in how we handle these situations. Sadly, cheaters will always exist, so I don't really want to get into the whole
"but why would anyone cheat in a silly circle-clicking game?"
aspect of the issue. It's inevitable, especially since it is really easy to cheat in OS. There were even cases when people unknowingly cheated, like when the fidget spinner fad was going around and someone used theirs to spin insanely fast. Anyhow, 99% of these cheaters do it knowingly, and it is causing a lot of trouble in the ranking ladder and the tournament scene. While it's fairly damaging that there are cheaters in the top 100. The harm is much greater in the tournament scene because the results are permanent, and in most cases, prizes cannot be taken back from the cheaters. While cheaters in the rankings are promptly removed with their scores, tournaments cannot really be repeated retrospectively.
Cheaters are bad. We get it, Rato. What's your point?
So, if you are new around here, you probably don't remember a few years ago when restrictions were taken very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that many false positives went through and appealing was a real hassle. You were supposed to tell them how you broke the rules and why, but in cases of false positives it was impossible and pleading for your innocence was useless. It was guilty until proven innocent. Many of the restrictions were also due to minor issues, like 6 digits multi-accounting without being aware that it is against the rules. You might say that not knowing the rules does not exempt anyone from them, but often these restrictions had the opposite effect, since the staff handling the appeals rarely responded, and if they did, they were pretty unhelpful. This was even a bigger issue with players those didn't know English, and the only language they could speak was in some obscure Eastern European one, like Hungarian for instance. The main point was that the way restrictions and appeals were handled were not good according to the community. It often took years to get just a response from the staff, and by that time players just created multi-accounts out of frustration. As a result of community outcry, appeals started being treated more leniently to allow for faster unbans. So even if it was a false positive, you would be out of OS jail in a couple of months. On top of that, the staff made it clear what you need to do to get unbanned. Tell the truth about what you did and show remorse. Right now, restrictions can be appealed in just 3 months. That means if everything goes smoothly, so if the staff actually responds to you and you don't mess up wording the appeal, you could be unrestricted within 4 months of getting banned. This used to be 6 months before June 2017. This change in attitude isn't because the staff suddenly thought that cheating is not that big of a deal, but because the community believed false positives and years-long appeals are worse than letting a few bad eggs back into the game until they are restricted again. Now, I don't disagree with the notion that people change and we should give them a second chance. However, I don't think many of these restricted players can reach sincere regret and repentance in just 3 months. I'm not saying nobody can, but with the ability to appeal within only 3 months, we are definitely downplaying the consequences of cheating. I know I said in the beginning that I don't want to get into why people cheat in OS, but why do people cheat in OS? After all, isn't OS supposed to be a single-player game? Well, yes and no. Tournaments are played in multiplayer lobbies, and while technically solo play is single-player gameplay, the leaderboards and the community interactions blur the line how much it is really a solo experience. The community recognition and even a streaming career give more than enough incentives for people to cheat. I asked my subscribers if they or their friends ever cheated, and a lot of times frustration came up as a main reason. Not just frustration in game, but actual frustration in real life. So basically it is a heat of the crime. So basically it is a heat of the moment crime. From what I gathered, a prolonged feeling of inadequacy in game combined with a certain negative experience in real life pushes most players in this category. Other times they just wanted to get banned because they were too addicted to the game. Well, not really the game, since you can still play offline, but to external elements such as farming and climbing ranks. Basically for these players, retrying farm maps is kind of like gambling. You insert some time and effort, and you may or may not get PP in return. According to this thought process, not getting any PP despite trying hundreds of times will make the person feel like they are losing to others, those who are capable of doing what the person set out to do. Probably the worst way to cheat is to cheat on tournaments, since it has to be premeditated. You just don't download, install and use a cheat in the middle of a tournament match. If you know how to get a cheat working in such a short time frame, then that's already worrying by itself. Of course, the reasons to cheat varies here as well. Since tournaments offer prizes, that is often a major motivation. Another, less evil motive is that the cheater doesn't want to let his team down. Of course, this reasoning is often flimsy, since if the player is caught, then his team is disqualified, and besides, anyone can say that after getting caught. So we have established 3 major reasons why people cheat. Cheating to get away from also this community, cheating due to frustration, and finally, cheating for personal gains. The underlying reasons are paramount in order to better deal with cheaters. Before moving forward and proposing some solutions, however, we need to talk about justice. A system can deal with rule breakers a number of ways. One of these ways is punishing the rule breaker by punitive justice. Punitive justice punishes the perpetrator for the sake of punishing them. They committed a crime. In our case, they cheated. So they need to literally suffer the consequences and be separated from the general populace. This kind of punishment is meant as a deterrent from future misbehavior and to appease the rest of us. If cheaters get punished appropriately, most of the community will probably say, "Serves them right," satisfying their sense of justice. In addition, future potential cheaters will look at these punishments and hopefully they will be deterred from cheating. The second type of justice is rehabilitative justice. This type of justice is not really applicable to us all that much since we don't have the capacity to take the cheaters to bloody therapy. This type of justice is the opposite of punitive justice, as it considers crimes, in our case cheating, as the manifestation of an underlying issue that made the person do the deed. As mentioned before, many cheaters start cheating when something breaks down in their real life. And we definitely ain't gonna go and have oath therapy and all that in here. Best we can do is be decent to each other, so some of these people wouldn't fall victims to their own circumstances. Third and final type of justice we will mention is the restorative justice. This one is tricky because restorative justice sounds perfect on paper, but you can't help feeling something is missing. It works on the basis that the damage done by crimes, in our case cheating, can be fixed by throwing money at it or doing some sort of free work that equals the bad thing that had been done. So for example, if someone steals your wallet and it had $100 in it, then the thief can be ordered to pay back that amount of money plus an extra, which restores the crime he has committed. One of the problems with this is it's kind of like a bribe, let's be real. It's kind of like a bribe to either the devs or the community, depending on how restorative justice was served. While it is truly inadequate in many cases, it may have its own place in certain situations. The main problem with cheating and such at the moment is that the consequences and the inherent immorality of it aren't enough of a deterrent to most cheaters. The 3-month period is kind of like a timeout. The punishment is so little that people may even go as far as to weigh the risk versus the potential reward and conclude that cheating might as well worth it for the community recognition and such. The people those cheat for potential reward, they don't really care that it's all fake. Some may even cheat just to take a break, that's how small the consequences are. After all, what does it matter for them? They will get unbanned within less than half a year anyway. We need greater consequences. It is true that the whole reason why the appeal system is so lenient now is because false positives resulted in enormous community outcry back in the day. But that was mainly because of the patronizing attitude of the staff that asked, "Little Kirito 420X, what did you do? What did little Kirito 420X do to get banned? Oh, go tell us, little Kirito 420X, and you will get your toy back." Fucking hell. The truth is that asking what the person did is rather counterproductive, as malicious people will lie through their teeth. Stupid people will not know what rules they broke, and innocent people will be completely unable to tell what the staff wants to hear, because they have no way of knowing what triggered their restriction. Genuine repentance is not something that a flimsy email message can show. Anyway, cheaters need to show that they are truly sorry, And more importantly, that they will never cheat again. Of course, that is impossible to know for 100%, especially since people change, so not just for the better, but sometimes for the worse as well. It is inevitable that a few bad eggs will slip through the cracks. This is why cheaters need to go through both punitive and restorative justice, in order to have less relapsers, and to use the contributions of the cheaters to make the game better.
So does that mean Raptor is against the zero tolerance policy? And how exactly would he imagine this punitive restorative justice thingy he is reading about?
To answer the first question, the zero tolerance policy is simply unfeasible for us. Besides that people would just create multi-accounts anyway, we simply don't have the perfect anti-cheat system that would be able to filter out every cheater accurately, without being really inconvenient for innocent players or even getting some false positives. Peppy made an OS game thread about the issue, and I will link it in the description below. It is worth reading if you are interested in the reasons why OS doesn't have a sophisticated anti-cheat system. In a nutshell, cheats will always be a step ahead of anti-cheat. By improving the anti-cheat system, you are also improving the cheats indirectly, until the point they are indistinguishable from legit plays. Without a perfect anti-cheat system, that is basically impossible to develop, false positives will inevitably slip through, and players those have truly changed will have to break the rules by multi-accounting to get back into the community. So zero tolerance policy should be reserved for only the worst cases, but the cheater mustn't know that they will never be unbanned, of course, as that will result in them just creating multi-accounts. So what do I propose then? Well, first I believe that we should treat different rule breaking much more differently than we do now. The current system is fine for small offenses like multi-accounting or extreme shitposting, but for higher degree crimes such as boosting, cheating for extended periods of time, and cheating on tournaments should get a much more severe treatment. Boosting is an interesting case, as usually the player whose account was boosted gets restricted, but the booster only gets a few hundred hours of silence. Anyhow, the appeal period should be extended for serious cases or reoffenders from 3 months, depending on the offense. For cheaters, those did it in the heat of the moment and came out within a week should get 6 months, and every week passed since that offense should add another month. So someone who came out after 4 weeks should only be able to appeal in 10 months. The reason behind the leniency for players those admit cheating immediately is because there is a distinction between people who regret cheating almost immediately and people those try their luck at how far they can get with cheating. Boosting as well should vary depending on the severity and the intent. Someone who got boosted accidentally and came out immediately should just get a warning, because accidents do happen, especially at meetups and events, which are getting more popular nowadays. If someone forgot to log off at the OS event from the tournament computers and a top player accidentally set a 700 PP score for him, or really, any score, then that should be treated much more leniently than when a higher skilled player is paid to boost a lower skilled player for months. As we talked about it earlier, the booster doesn't really get all that big of a punishment despite contributing to the offense. If the higher skilled player would have more to lose than a few hundred hours of multiplayer privileges, let's say a year of restriction, then he wouldn't be so tempted to take the bribe from the lower skilled players. High profile cases should also get a different treatment, as they will be a solid example to the community. If a top 50 player has been cheating in tournaments, have been hacking his top PP plays for months, and showed absolutely no remorse when he gets restricted, then he should get the harshest punishment possible. By allowing such player to get unrestricted in less than half a year, it sends the wrong message to the community. This is especially true when the common player with much less severe crimes may not even get a reply for years. High-profile cases must be punished harder, because it defines the stance of the stuff on cheating in the eyes of the community. Earlier we talked about anti-cheat development and that it is nearly impossible to keep up with the cheaters, especially on the budget OS has. This is where restorative justice comes into play. The first and most controversial part of it would be pay-gating appeals for those who have been restricted for cheating. Basically, you would have to pay a certain amount of money to appeal your restriction. I know that sounds very greedy, and the example we have seen in the past left a sour taste in the community's mouth. But if we want to deal with cheating effectively, we will have to get funding somehow. And where else would be the best place to get that money from than the cheaters themselves? £60 might be a bit too steep, yeah, but $20 for example would be manageable. And if you wanted to be really generous to the appealers, you could give them equal amounts of supporter for the money they spent on the appeal. Basically, cheaters could pay for the appeal by buying 8 months of supporter. That way, technically it wouldn't be a bribe for the appeal, which could get rejected anyway. Instead, they are getting something in return in addition to the chance to appeal. They could even gift the supporter, I mean. Why not, right? While certain cheats are really hard to combat, the devs could use the money that is coming in from these appeals to handle cases those are easier to counter, such as replay submitting. For example, the system could check certain scores against other submitted plays on the map, and if it found matching data, well, it's hammer time. We wouldn't have to rely on comparing plays manually, allowing for the system to operate much more effectively. Of course, this wouldn't eliminate all kinds of cheating, but it would be a decent start. From then on, clever computer people could figure out the best ways to use the funds to combat other kinds of cheating. Now, we talked about a lot of things those happen before the rule breaker is unrestricted. Let's talk about what should happen after they have been unrestricted. After all, once they are out of OS prison, there isn't really any consequences for their actions besides not being able to participate in the next OVC. And according to the new rules, they cannot play in badge tournaments either. Which, I mean, is not really a big punishment, especially if you are a 6-digit. Anyhow, while the latter is a good step forward, I think it is important to differentiate between different types of rule breaking. If someone was restricted for posting or multi-accounting, there is little point in not letting them play in the OVC. They were not really cheating, so the integrity of the tournaments wouldn't be in potential danger. And by not letting multi-accounters and shitposters play in OVC, we are also depriving the audience from a more exciting tournament as well. Anyhow, my main proposal would be introducing badges of shame for every unrestricted rule breaker. That way we could use something a lot of people really care about in OS, social status, as a way to introduce further consequences for breaking rules. The badge of shame must be placed over the rule breaker's profile picture, since that is also of great importance for many players, and it is visible not only on the main site but in-game as well. You can see right now the designs I would have imagined on the screen. The diagonal design is definitely more intrusive, which is kind of the point. The design which places the badge of shame on the bottom is much less intrusive, allowing for the player to display their 12-year-old girl avatars without much obstruction. Having a prominent sign that differentiates past rule breakers from legit players alone would be a much harsher punishment than a couple of months of restriction. Badged tournaments wouldn't have to wait until everyone is signed up to check if nobody has cheated in the past year, which would remove a lot of weight from the organizer's shoulder, especially for tournaments like OS Battlegrounds, since the registration phase there is very short. However, this stuff always had a strict policy of even mentioning cheating in games, so I'm not sure if they would welcome something like plastering "cheater" all over unrestricted players' profiles. I'm sure a few of us remember when Cookiesy was word filtered to Obama because people kept bringing him up, which was not allowed when he was restricted. Basically, you cannot talk about restricted players or cheating in-game. Plain and simple, isn't it? Anyhow, even though we would let these players back into the community when they are unrestricted, their past actions would still have an impact until they truly redeem themselves. Which brings us to the second part of restorative justice, which would be earning the right to remove the badge of shame from their profile pictures. To be fair, having the badge of shame permanently displayed would also work, but I feel like the community eventually forgives or forgets. So giving past rule breakers a chance to erase the badge of shame may be a better idea. Having it permanently there would serve as a deterrent for other players and a reminder in case the community forgot. Of course, people change and many people broke rules when they were kids, yeah, I know. So that's why we should also look into ways unrestricted players could remove that badge of shame. One way would be just letting it expire after a year, or whenever they can apply for OVC and badge tournaments again. But that's boring, so let's theorize a little bit more. There could be options to use monetary ways to remove it. I mean, after all, that would be the most straightforward way, and we could always use more funds to make better anti-cheats. For example, after gifting a year worth of supporter to other people, you could have an option to remove your badge of shame. It should be an option since I'm sure there would be a few people who would keep the badge, even after buying a year of supporter, to remind themselves that their actions have consequences. Sort of like self-punishing, but Yeah, very noble. Anyhow, we should look into alternative solutions as well, since this would be probably the most controversial way. Many real-life criminal cases are dealt with by sentencing the lawbreaker to community service, picking up garbage, volunteering at a soup kitchen, etc. Now, as OS is moving more and more towards becoming a game where the community creates most of the content, we could use a lot of help maintaining the game. One example of OS community service would be organizing tournaments. Let's say, after organizing 3 successful community tournaments, Mr. Cheater's badge of shame could be removed from his profile picture. Or, after modding 100 maps, Mr. Multi-Accounter's badge of shame could be removed and so on. This way, the rule breaker would give back to the community and proactively mend what they damaged due to their actions. They would earn the community's forgiveness. Well, this video turned out to be longer than expected. To conclude, cheaters have been an increasing threat for the game's competitive integrity. While leniency should be given for minor cases, the consequences have been reduced so low that players aren't deterred enough from cheating anymore, and sometimes they are even using the appeal period to force themselves to take a break from the game. The OS community does provide a certain sense of validation for high-ranked or high-skilled players, which is more than enough motivation for certain people to cheat, no matter how sad or unbelievable that sounds. With greater consequences and semi-permanent punishments, some of these players could be deterred from cheating. However, I'm absolutely and definitely not advocating for bringing back the old system from a couple of years ago, but instead of pushing the appeal time lower and lower, we should look into alternative punishments, and also different punishments for different rule breakings. So, what do you guys think? Do you have any alternative ideas how to deal with the recent spike in cheating? Or do you think things are fine as they are? Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you do.